It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. A Microsoft update to last week's Microsoft update in the news. We'll also talk about Dirtboxes. They're flying over you all the time. And Steve will answer some questions as well, including a Stone DVD. Security Now is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 482, recorded November 18th, 2014. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 201. Security Now is brought to you by PagerDuty. PagerDuty decreases alerting noise for IT operations and developers to ensure that the right engineers are notified at the right time. Increase your uptime and sign up for a 14-day free trial at pagerduty.com/twit. And by Harry's. For guys who want a great shaving experience for a fraction of what they're paying now, go to harrys.com and get $5 off your first purchase by entering the code SecurityNow when you check out. It's time for Security Now, the show that covers your security and privacy online. And there could be no better host for this show than Mr. G, Stephen Gibson. He is the man in charge at the Gibson Research Corporation, grc.com, and also creator of many useful tools, including SpinRite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. Hello, Steve.
Yo, Leo. Great to be with you. This was a Q&A after last week's coverage of certificate transparency. And in fact, we may be doing another show on certificate stuff next week as a consequence of some just breaking news this morning. An announcement from the EFF, Mozilla, and the University of Michigan about the EFF's initiative to make certificates, web browsing certificates, web server certificates, the kind we're always talking about, both free and safe to issue and somehow kind of auto-renewing. So there's a new protocol called ACME we'll be talking about. And then also, boy, Microsoft is having a rough go of it for their patches in November. One dropped today that they'd held back.
An out-of-bands update? Wow.
Yeah. They revised one that was the most important one last week. Turned out to have problems with it. There's an update to Firefox with a cool new feature that I like. I wanted to chat with you about the so-called flying Dirtboxes, which...
I'm an expert in flying Dirtboxes.
Yes, I heard you on Twitter, and I think that's great.
Peeved me off a little bit, so I'm...
Yeah, well, rightly so, and many other people. You can imagine the ACLUs having, is on oxygen.
Yeah.
Also, an update on the cellular provider super cookies, some information, some news about WhatsApp, BitTorrent Sync, and this is a Q&A. So since we had so much stuff to talk, also some interesting miscellaneous stuff. I wanted to chat with you a little bit about Interstellar, and also
you saw it, eh?
Yeah, also an upcoming movie or production about Alan Turing's life that looks really good.
I talked to somebody who saw it who says it's amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad. And then we have a Q&A. But so much going on there that I just found 5 questions. So a half pint Q&A, which I think will pretty much round out a good podcast.
Excellent.
So lots and lots of stuff today.
Holy camoly. Well, before we start, let me talk about PagerDuty and one of our newest sponsors, and we're really glad to have them, at pagerduty.com/twit, T-W-I-T. If you rely on software and services that have to be up, if they're mission critical, you need to know about PagerDuty. It's an essential tool, the hub, in effect, to your operations. PagerDuty connects all your systems into a single view where you can see critical events across all your monitoring tools. There are already 100 ready-to-use integrations, including, as you can see on their page, Nagios, New Relic, Keynote, App Dynamics, But with their full API, you can roll your own. When incidents occur, you'll decrease your resolution time. The right team gets notified right away. And based on on-call schedules that it knows, it already has that information. And personalized alerting preferences from each of your employees. It'll contact the right person right away. If alerts are missed, no problem. It'll automatically escalate issues to another team member until somebody responds. I love that. We have a lot of people who use PagerDuty in our chat room. When we first started doing the ad, they said, oh, PagerDuty, yeah. You can decrease the noise, too, because incidents are automatically filtered and deduped. Make sure that only actionable alerts are delivered. So if you've ever been on PagerDuty and you've received a bunch of dumb, bogus, or repetitive alerts, you'll be very happy to hear about that. PagerDuty is relentless when it comes to reliability, fully distributed across multiple data centers and multiple hosting providers. You don't have to worry about them ever going down. There are also multiple contact method providers per method, so you will never, ever miss an alert. You can customize it to fit your needs, your team, and how they work regardless of location or size. PagerDuty. It's so good, it's trusted by Microsoft, by GitHub, by Boeing, by Nike, Pinterest, by Box. Get the right engineer on the right problem at the right time. Visit pagerduty.com/twit to sign up for a free 14-day trial for as little as $19 a month. Wow. You can increase your uptime with PagerDuty for as little as $19 a month. And again, pagerduty.com/twit. When you go there, you'll see you can enter a chance to win a PagerDuty exclusive on-call survival kit. pagerduty.com/twit. Oh, my. I was hearing radio sound in all of this, and I realized what it is. It's my Pono player has decided all of a sudden to start playing Psycho Killer, Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Hey, so we briefly mentioned it last week. What do you think? You've had it for a week now.
I'm going to review it before you buy. That's why I have it in studio.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'll keep watching.
I'll give you the thumbnail.
Cool.
I want to support it because I really want to support the notion that you can buy high-res studio, quality recordings of your favorite music. And in order for that to work, we have to, develop an ecosystem of people who are willing to buy it. And that's always going to be a specialty. Although I have to say, the Pono Music Store, HD Tracks, Bowers and Wilkins has a Society of Sound. They all sell albums for, $17, $18.
And so these are the same albums we're familiar with. They've gone back to...
They're effectively studio masters.
Right. So they've gone back to them and said, okay, wait a minute. But we want the raw original data before you ran it through your compression, and that's what they offer.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll get stuff with compression on it, both digital and audio. But what you're getting with this stuff is FLAC files, so they're losslessly compressed. And then the bit rate is, varies. I mean, sometimes it's just on some of these systems it's just CD quality, 44.1 by 16 bits, but most of them are at least 24 bits, and then some of them are 96K, some of them are 192K. Yeah. And
big files.
They're big files. I doubt you'd hear the difference, but nowadays with big hard drives, who cares?
Yeah, it's a very good point. The whole MP3 thing was designed back in a really lean, storage and bandwidth environment.
Right. So, I think we'll look back on this MP3 era as kind of just a unfortunate blip. I'm hoping. Anyway, in order for this all to work, besides being able to buy the tracks, you need something to play back the tracks. For instance, Apple and iTunes will not play back high-res tracks. They'll play back a certain degree, but not all the way. But you can get DACs, digital to analog converters, that will do 192.24. Mm-hmm. And you can get very high-quality digital to analog converters, DACs. So my Onkyo AV receiver, for instance, has an excellent TI DAC that does 192.24. So I can listen on my stereo. I can actually put on a USB key, put these high-res tracks, pop it in the stereo, and listen on good headphones or on my good speakers. And you know what? Maybe it's psychology. I don't know. I think it sounds a lot better. It's the soundstage is larger, is more detailed, is more open,
I would think it'd be brighter. Yeah, cleaner.
Yeah, the high ends are brighter, but you know what? Even the bass is more precise. It's not as you feel like it's more detailed. And then but the question is, an iPod won't play it back. So Neil Young created this Pono, P-O-N-O player, ponomusic.com, to basically be a high-res iPod. But as you can see, I mean, it's kind of bigger than an iPod. It's a triangle. In fact, you could put it on your desk and it could have your name on it, and it would be just about the size.
Your name tag.
Yeah,
right.
Of your desk name tag. This one is, I got it on Kickstarter because it was a Kickstarter project. So I have the Neil Young limited edition. This is 251 out of 500. But that was just because I was an early adopter. You can buy them now. They're in their second manufacturing phase. It won't be available for a month or two. $400. But they say, and I think they're right, a very good DAC in here, plus a good headphone amp, because you're
I'm sure they did, because when they first announced it, I immediately went to the specs for the DAC that they were using, because I had not looked at ultra high resolution DACs for a long time, and there's a lot there. I mean, there's a black art to merging the digital world and the analog world at that level of resolution, because when you're talking 24 bits, I mean, those bits are really small down at the least significant end, and there's a lot of digital noise flying around. So, I mean, it's an amazing piece of just technology to be able to convert 24 bits of digital data to analog with that kind of precision. It's really interesting from an engineering standpoint.
Well, and you know a lot about this because I know you worked in audio as a student, and this is one of the things that you are kind of pretty up on.
Yeah.
The problem is, and a lot of people say this, it's all psychological. It's the golden ears thing, and you think you're getting better quality, so it's going to be better, sound better to you, and all of that. And I can't vouch for that one way or the other.
There has always been an audiophile component to people who enjoy music, people who really want good speakers and good amplifiers. I mean, just who enjoy that. And so I think it's cool that there's an audiophile offering for within otherwise this white earbuds on the bus crowd.
Well, that's the other thing, because now so now you got this. Now you got to either get, this has both headphone and line out. So now you either have to get really, really good headphones. Yeah. $400 for this, that's nothing compared to the headphones.
Right.
Or you have to hook it up to your stereo via analog in. And, if your stereo doesn't have a good DAC, well, this could be, in a way, giving it a good DAC. But you want great speakers or great headphones to even approximate it. But assuming you have that and you have the ears, we might be too old to really. I think I hear a difference. I think I really hear a difference. But
I would just call it the last 0.5%. And, if you're someone who wants to push to get the last 0.5%, then, hey, great.
It was interesting.
It's not going to be a huge market, but it'll be a market.
Scott Wilkinson, our home theater geek, on his AVS forum, he's the editor over there, did a blind A/B comparison. He posted 4 files, 2 of them in CD quality, 2 of them high res, all FLAC, and he invited his readers to download them and tell him which were which. And he found an interesting result, which actually, to me, confirms that you can tell the difference if you're paying attention. And he also asked, what equipment are you listening? The readers that didn't have equipment that could handle higher resolution music, 50-50. It was almost exactly 50-50. The statistical odds for guessing.
Expectation, yes.
Yeah, for guessing. Of the listeners who had equipment that could play back higher res files, 80% accurately picked the high-res files. That to me says, that's more than statistical. That to me says that you can tell the difference. Maybe somebody 57 years old can't tell the difference, but somebody can tell the difference.
Right.
And it makes me happy just to buy the music in as high a quality as I can, and it's not that much more expensive.
And you got storage space now, so
and
big
I
deal.
can store it.
Yeah.
The whole collection, which is about 20 albums, because I'm not buying everything, just my favorite things. 60 gigs. It's not a lot. Now, that was a lot when a hard drive was 2 gigs.
Oh, my God. Well, I remember, that MFM drives were 20 megs. So, yeah, we were doing everything we could to squeeze music down.
But 60 gigs now, you know what? I put it on my Dropbox. I put it on my transporter because you don't want to lose these. You can't, that's it. They're gone. And I put it on my Pono. This has 128 gigs storage capacity. So easy. Yeah. And classical music sounds beautiful, but really my favorite albums are mostly rock, and boy, they sound great. When they're not digitally recorded, a lot of albums, when did they start using PCM recording? In the 80s? 90s? So those you're going to get the original, quality is going to be the same as the original PCM recordings, whatever they recorded at. If it's tapes, so for instance, I have Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks, one of my favorite albums, recorded on tape. But the tape is analog. Yeah. So they master them still at a high bit rate, hoping to capture all the analog data. Right. So it seems to me, would be better coming off the analog master in a high quality system to a high bit rate recording is going to be better than what you got on a CD. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Although, analog systems are notoriously troublesome too. You've got, remember WoW and Flutter, which are like real things. And then Hiss, you do have a signal to noise ratio on tape that people like Dolby made their fortunes trying to overcome. Yeah. So what's really the best would be high-end, high bandwidth digital sampling, right, that's then stored digitally and then returned to you digitally, right, and then let's hope that you can transduce that back into analog that your ears are able to accept. We don't yet have our digital interface. Or if they did it on tape, that the tape was going around really fast. Well, and in fact, that was one of the things they did was they ran the tape at a high speed in order to increase the signal-to-noise ratio. I have a recording which was clearly analog of The Rite of Spring. It's Leonard Bernstein, and then I guess New York Philharmonic. And the dynamic range on Stravinsky's Rite of Spring is huge. It starts with one oboe or some woodwind, and you can hear the air in the room. You can hear the musicians rustling. You can hear the flutter in the room. Yeah, and as far as hiss goes, you hear no hiss on any of these recordings. Yeah, there's maybe a little hiss on the Stravinsky, but not much. But mostly, what you're hearing is the susurration of human respiration. Yeah, like being there. Anyway, this is a security podcast, but I know you're really interested in this stuff, so I think it's worth. Yeah. And yes, the Pono does a great job, but really, it's such a big topic. It's not just the Pono; it's about getting good speakers, good headphones, and all the rest. Right. Okay. So, to our topic, Microsoft having a really rough November. We spoke last week, which was Patch Tuesday, the second Tuesday of November, about them dropping basically a mega, and I called it a red alert set of updates, because what was the third one in order, the MS14-066, that one. It was, it's funny because my impression, I've since been reading echoed elsewhere, was that they just sort of slipped it out there and didn't say much. And when I'm just scanning the details of it for the podcast, it's like, what? And as I said, I had to make a trip over to my physical servers at level 3 in order to make sure they got through the process of updating this, because this one was not one I could allow stand. I should mention that I don't patch my servers every month because I have a very specifically designed, constrained environment, and a lot of stuff that affects other people, like, SQL Server. I don't have any SQL Server. I don't have any .NET stuff exposed or active server pages or any of that. So I'm able to, and I do, rather than just doing a wholesale update, I actually look at each individual aspect of the patches, and I go, I don't really, and in fact, there wasn't one since May of this year. When I looked, the last time I had installed patches, Windows Update told me, and my logs told me, was
early in May of 2014. That was when there was one that I thought, okay, this one I can't ignore. This one needs to get put in. And so at that point, I caught the system up. I caught my machines up with, brought them current. But they've been idling since. I'd never reboot them. They never crash. They just run. But this one was the 066 was a biggie. However, a couple days after Tuesday came the news that they had botched something about those 4 new cipher suites that they added. Our listeners will remember that last week is not only are they fixing some sort of a horrible vulnerability that we didn't know that much about, except they just said, this is a horrible vulnerability. There's no workarounds. There's no mitigations. Fix this. And both for servers and for workstations. And remember that they also added, which is unusual for Microsoft, to add functionality during a patch. Normally they do that later in the month, but for whatever reason, this included 4 new TLS cipher suites, and they were good ones. They were Diffie-Hellman, which we like. They were SHA 256 and 384, so good, strong SHA 2 family hashes. I mean, you want those. Turns out they were broken. And so people who did follow Microsoft's advice and, implorings about getting their systems updated, then began having like random lockups and server crashes and huge problems because there were problems with the cipher suites. So the advice then came out a couple days later, delete these from the registry and reboot your machine. The good news was, since I had already overridden the choice of cipher suites to deliberately select the ones that I wanted, that overrode any automatic inclusion of the new bad ones, so I didn't have any trouble. But today, in addition to dropping another update, which they had held back last week, so we have another completely different, and everyone is running around again saying this is really important update today. That is, they did an out of band essentially, although technically they just held it back because they apparently weren't ready for it, or it wasn't tested enough or whatever last week. So in addition to that, and this is important because this is not automatic. So everybody who's got IIS servers, I'm talking to you, you need to manually now re-download the MS14-066 patch and reapply it. They have reissued it as version 2, and so I will be doing that at the end after this podcast is through, since all of this just came in this morning as I was prepping things and haven't had a chance to. Besides, I'm always twitchy about rebooting the server, and so I wouldn't want to do it here before the podcast. So, but anyway, anyone who applied 066 last week, and everyone should have, it's not so crucial for workstations, but you might want to do it anyway. You need to go to the page and MS14-066 and get it again manually, download it, and then reapply it. And so everybody who's using IIS in a web server role exposed to the internet should do that. This fixes whatever it was they broke in those 4 cipher suites.
I imagine they'll push it at some point, but they're not pushing it now.
They're not pushing it now. That's a good question, Lee. I wonder, maybe they're just a little gun shy after having messed it up last week. Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. They really ought to re-push it, and maybe
I'm sure they will. But yeah,
next month.
Yeah.
And the bad guys and the good guys. Okay, a range of hat colors from white through gray into black are in fact pounding on what it was that Microsoft changed. I have seen disassemblies posted online of the patch. They have the people of various hat colors have found the change that Microsoft made, and they are managing to get Windows servers to crash by fuzzing the TLS handshake. So this is always the first stage of developing an exploit. So, and what is a concern is, and I didn't mention this last week, I should have, this is clearly wormable. So we haven't seen something like this since Code Red and Nimda and Blaster worms, which were huge events on the internet. This is of that scale because an unwitting server that supports secure connections could, once this evolves from crashing servers to running explicit code on servers, and that'll be next week's news, then it becomes something where the hackers are going to, first they'll probably play around with trying to get into servers, depending on how much they're able to do through this exploit. But then they're going to want to just do a worm. And so that servers that are exploited start searching for other servers. And that was immediately where you went to last week, Leo, and you were correct about that, about the idea of, compromised servers then compromising others.
Yeah, we know that's how they work because
or their users. Yeah.
Yeah, compromising a server doesn't get you as much as compromising everybody.
Yeah.
And is it almost always the case that if you can crash, you could do a buffer overflow and crash an OS or crash a system, that you're going to likely be able to figure out a way to then go to the next step and compromise it?
I don't know that we could say definitively one way or the other. It's certainly possible for there to be crash-only problems. Microsoft calls those denial of service vulnerabilities.
Right.
And we hear about those all the time. Half of the Microsoft patches that we're receiving are not remote code execution. They're so-called denial of service. And, we're used to thinking in terms of, the bandwidth flood style DOS attack. But when Microsoft uses the term, what they mean is you crashed the service, thus denying the service that you crashed. So a lot of these are just, we could make the code path crash, but we weren't, by the nature of it, we weren't able to give it a payload. And so we just don't know. We won't know, maybe this won't go any further, but we know that people are looking at it really hard. I mean, they're tearing this code apart, figuring out exactly what the code path is, and then they're certainly going to see whether, given what they learn, can they arrange to get a buffer executed. That's, of course, that's the keys to the kingdom. So,
wow,
so that's
amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, really cool stuff.
Yep.
Okay, now I got news a couple of days ago from Firefox that it wanted to restart, and so I always, check to see what's going on. I got updated to 33.1, and then this morning for the podcast, I went to About Help, Help About. And it said, "Oh, look, I've got something more." So they did a little patch on 33.1, and now we're at 33.1.1. Here's the cool thing they added that I really think is neat. They call it Forget, and it's a new means of enhancing privacy. The traditional approaches are the so-called incognito browsing, where you open a window or a tab or an instance, you preemptively, with expectation that you are going to be doing something you don't want the system to record for whatever reason. That's been the traditional approach. Firefox version 3.1 adds a forget button that allows you, and I call it the regret button.
Or the day after button.
Exactly. That allows you to cause Firefox to expunge from its memory the previous 5 minutes, 2 hours, or day, or 24 hours. And so when 33.1 comes back up, it gives you a little song and dance to talk about its new features. And one of the things you can say is, oh, yes, I would like to have the forget button added to my toolbar. You can still always access it through the menus, of course, but it's a little sort of a spinny backwards arrow. And I just thought that was really neat.
That's such a brilliant idea. I don't know why nobody's thought of that. I mean, every browser has an incognito mode now, but the idea that you may not know you want to be incognito till after you visit that site, right?
Exactly,
Whoops.
which is why I think this is so clever.
Very good.
The reason is, from an implementation standpoint, it is much trickier. You're having to do some sort of journaling or logging. You have like time passing, and so you need to go back and rewind your state to an earlier time. That's from an implementation standpoint, that's a lot trickier than setting up an environment that you're going to flush so that none of its updates are recorded permanently. So this is a little, I mean, from an implementation standpoint, I appreciate that they're able to do this. It's like, oh, that's very cool, but also a very handy feature. So at this point, Firefox now has it.
We ever talked about, and this would be a great subject for a later date, just what is forgotten and what is not forgotten in an incognito mode?
Yeah, good point.
Because obviously, forgetting is going to have limitations. For instance, when you enter an incognito mode, I presume, well, maybe not. Actually, your IP address would have to be sent to the site, wouldn't it? Or you wouldn't have a conversation.
Yeah, so you're right. So the idea is it would be like cookies that got set, or caching of things that your browser received during that time. The things that are normally sticky don't stick. They're kept in RAM. They're never written to disk, and they are, when implemented correctly, proactively overwritten before the memory that they were occupying is released back to the operating system. But incognito is not necessarily anonymous. So the things the browser is sending out in its query headers are probably still identifying. But you're right. It would be worth digging in and seeing whether browsers sanitize their queries in some fashion, because that would be another form of anonymizing, which is really different than forgetting on your local system.
Yeah, and frankly, if that's the case, it's not something you could do retroactively. You can't retroactively sanitize a conversation.
Yes.
And so somebody's pointing out, this is really not so very different from clear browser history or clear cookies. It's just time. You could specify the amount of time that you're clearing.
Right. Yes, and I'm sure we've all been in the position of where we have, sometimes because we needed to, or sometimes inadvertently, we've over cleared our history. Like if you clear your third-party cookies, baby, well, okay, all of the semi-static things that know you no longer know you. So you're logging in everywhere again because you've said, I want to just scrub all of my sessions.
That's a pain when you do that.
It is. Exactly. And that's the point. If you knew that you only needed to go back, that if 5 minutes would repair whatever you had mistakenly done, it's like, oh, good. I just take 5 minutes, please, because I'd like to keep everything else I've been doing all morning.
Yeah.
Also, they built in, sort of making it very easy to use, the DuckDuckGo anonymous searching website as one of their available offered searches. So that's the second thing that was added, is it's built in, making it very easy for someone to choose non-tracking searching as an option on the internet. So I thought that was nice. Speaking of what's not nice, flying Dirtboxes.
Mm-hmm. Even the name should tell you something. You have a nice little graph or a graphic here.
Yeah, the front page. I always try to put something relevant to the podcast topics on the first page, the bottom half of the first page of the show notes. And this is the graphic I don't know, like maybe it was the Wall Street Journal. They broke the story, but they're behind a paywall that I couldn't get past. So everyone was looking at CNN's coverage of this from the Wall Street Journal behind the paywall. But it got picked up and widely covered because it upset people. The story, okay, we've talked in the last few months about the so-called fake cell towers, and we really need we need a better term than cell tower because there's nothing that's a tower about it, as I explained before. The idea is...
It looks more like a palm tree in some cases.
Yeah. Well, what it really is a briefcase.
In this case. Well, they've had this, what was it, the Stinger?
Yes, and that was my point. Is we talked about those, for example, in maybe in Las Vegas, in casinos, where or law enforcement. We know of municipalities all over the country that have these devices, which are essentially they're fake cell systems.
Sites.
Sites. Unfortunately, cell tower is really the only term we have. But I remember when you and I were talking about this before. The question was, could you, if you traveled, could one of these hand off to a real cell tower? And it was no, because the way real cell towers hand off among each other is they're able to just switch the conversation from their feed to the other tower's feed and make a seamless transition. In fact, that was really when we use the term cellular. That's what cellular means, is this really cool concept of a grid of, and it's actually a hexagon, ideally, of overlapping cells where each cell only has a short range and only needs to transact conversations within its radius. And then as someone driving, in the classic example, drives out of that cell's coverage range, they're already in an adjoining cell's coverage. And by looking at the relative signal strength, the outgoing cell can see that it's beginning to lose this guy, and so it's able to query the adjacent cells and say, hey, who sees this guy? And one of the cell towers says, hey, I do. And then so the other cell tower says, okay, you take over. And so that switch occurs without the user, without anyone in the conversation ever knowing. That's cellular communications. And so you're able to drive from, San Francisco to San Diego, potentially. I mean, it doesn't really work, but...
I had no idea that that's how it worked. I thought somehow the phone was involved, like, oh, I see a better tower. So it's actually the towers that are communicating with one another and doing the handoff themselves.
And negotiating. Yeah, and negotiating that traffic. And so they get all kinds of interesting information. For example, I don't know if we talked about it on this show. There was some guy who was driving somewhere in the Midwest on his commute with a very powerful cell jammer, thinking he was doing some civic good by preventing other motorists in his environment from having any conversations on their cell phones because you're not supposed to talk. I know. And he was...
That's horrible.
It was horrible. And it went on for like several years. And he was like blocking all emergency services and other stuff because it was just some horribly overpowered just blanket of the cone of silence driving down the freeway. Well, the cell carriers all noticed this pattern that repeated at commute time, the same location, the same place every time each day during the week, not on the weekends, and they caught him because they were able to associate this moving zone of destruction through the cell system, and finally figured out, okay, that guy passes by the same time. Oh, there it is.
For 2 years. This is the definition of dick behavior, ladies and gentlemen. Holy cow. He's going to face a $48,000 fine, by the way.
Yeah, a ton of fines because it is absolutely illegal to do this. And so the point is that there's a monitoring of all this going on, and the cellular system gets feedback. And so what they saw was like this weird dead zone traveling down the geographical territory that was, the freeway. And finally put two and two together.
Here's the story from The Verge. I'm loving this. By the way, it wasn't Verizon, AT&T, or Sprint that caught him. It was Metro PCS. Apparently, Verizon doesn't care. We see cells drop all the time.
We got your
reception was flatlining along the same point of I-4 in Florida twice each day. The FCC used, quote, sophisticated interference detection techniques. I've seen the trucks. There's 5 or 6 of them. They're not a huge number, but they have these great trucks that can go out.
Really cool Yagi antennas.
Yeah, and track the stuff down. And officers, they found this guy in his Toyota Highlander. When officers finally pulled him over, it didn't take long to confirm their suspicions. As they approached his car, officers immediately noticed their radios lost all contact with dispatch. Jammers, the FCC says, are illegal under any circumstances and can result in jail time.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So that was, we were talking about fixed or law enforcement based sort of suitcase things and how they use these, when people don't know they're there. Basically, these things are pretending to be cell towers. They get your phone to connect to them for whatever law enforcement purposes they are alleging. What the Wall Street Journal discovered and has been picked up is that there are also small aircraft flying overhead with the same technology called in the articles covering this, it's like fake airborne cell towers, in quote, dragnet and inspect all phones below. So you can imagine the American Civil Liberties Union is unhappy.
Chris Soghoian, who's their CTO, Sal Soghoian's brother, said this is appalling. He says, I can't imagine, even if a judge approved this, he even understood the incredibly widespread nature. I mean, you're gathering as many as hundreds of thousands of phones in this dragnet.
Yes, you are causing every cell phone within its range on the ground to preferentially connect to this fake flying cell tower. And, law enforcement says that they're doing it to catch bad guys.
How is this different from the guy in Florida? Because aren't they breaking the cell phone when they do this?
It's a very good question. Whether can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
It's a jammer. I'm sorry. I'm talking to a dirt box.
There's a government dirt box flying overhead. Yeah.
19 airports in the United States. These are Cessnas. They're small planes. And they say it covers 90% of the U.S. population is covered by these flights.
Wow.
They say they gather what would they get? They would get the unique identifier for each phone.
Yeah, they generically we would say they get the metadata, which is they say they're not messing with the conversation. We know that the boxes we were discussing before they're pretending to be cell towers. The decryption
There's no phone calls going through them though, right? I mean, it's not as we've said before with these stingers, you're not going to continue to have operation.
No, but you are, but they are monitoring the conversations of the cell phones that they're intercepting.
You will get 5 bars briefly. Look over your head. If you're getting 5 bars and you see a Cessna, you're being gathered.
I have a great connection to the spy tool.
But as you pointed out, they couldn't do a handoff because they're not really in communication with the cell network. So your call's going to be interrupted at some point.
Yeah, the problem is very little is known about this. The government clams up, and the only problem I have is the secrecy. If this weren't secret, then then
No.
it's like, okay, justify your existence.
No, it's not. It's a fishing expedition. They say just as the NSA does. No. If you're not a suspect, we let go of the information. But you've got to imagine they're harvesting it and storing it in that giant facility in Utah, just as the NSA does. They collect everything. They say, look, we're not going to look at it if you're not a suspect. But if you ever became a suspect, you could be pretty sure they would say, well, we know where he was.
Yeah, we would like to know where these people were. CNN contacted the Department of Justice for comment, and an official at the DOJ would not confirm or deny the use of flying spoof cell towers. He said any discussion would let criminals and foreign governments, quote, determine our capabilities and limitations, which, is just like, well, you can't make us talk, so we're not going to.
And, of course, because this is metadata, it's not, you don't need a warrant.
Right.
And this is where really we've got to get the courts up to date, because metadata is valuable. It is identifiable ultimately and has a huge privacy implication. It's not just, metadata. And so this is like a pen register search. This is like when they go to the portals run by the phone companies to say, hey, where was Leo on Friday?
We've discussed this, of course, in the context of Snowden and all of that, but you could easily make the case that metadata is a far richer source of information for research and plumbing, even than knowing what the person's yammering about their dry cleaning and whether they need to remember to get cat food or what. Who you talk to and when, that your 6 degrees of separation, that's really vital information.
Well, we know it is because they want it, because it helps them track terrorists. So we know it's valuable.
And, and we know that people knock on, that the government knocks on people's doors saying, hey, you're a friend of so-and-so, tell us about him.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just what you're going to get. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. So, okay. AT&T got some props, I guess is the the current jargon.
That's how the kids say it, yeah.
Yeah, for ending their super cookie injection testing, in air quotes. On the other hand, in digging into this story further, I'm less impressed. Essentially, first of all, this is the Verizon and AT&T super cookie, which their equipment is injecting into their subscribers' query headers. I detected it on both my AT&T and Verizon Wi-Fi accounts. So I saw it myself as soon as I switched off Wi-Fi, which was preferentially handling my broadband, my internet connection. Then immediately I started to see their injection of these UIDH and other query headers, which contain a serial number, which is about me. It is associated by my account with the carrier. And makes for a tracking super cookie. We know that it's actually being used. The concern when we first talked about it was that it was overly strong. That is, unfortunately, the nature of what they're doing to inject a something that's unshakable, can't be deleted, can't be incognitoized or regretterized or anything. This thing is stuck into your query after you've lost control of the traffic. The concern was that third parties could also use it because all they had to care about was that it was static. Well, now we have evidence of that. In the developer notes for one of Twitter's acquisitions last year, a company called Mopub, which bills itself as the world's largest mobile ad exchange, it explicitly uses Verizon's tag, the super cookie, to track and target cell phone users for ads pursuant to instructions on the software developers page. I have a link in the show notes where you can scan through. And in fact, I tweeted this link because as I was scanning through it, just to verify that it was there, there's so much else there. It's just chilling. It's like, okay, I mean, the guys that want to track us get a ton of stuff. And so again, the Verizon and AT&T super cookie are among what they get. Unfortunately, AT&T's suspension looks to be just temporary. I mean, they desperately want this. So they're calling what they were doing a test, which they have ended and sort of rolled out an end to it, although at no point are they saying they learned a lesson. Maybe they ended it as a function of some backlash, although even that's not clear, because they're still talking, even now in discussions of this being over, talking about, creating a code that changes every 24 hours. And of course, we've talked about the idea of changing the code, how if there's any other information that allows bridging between changes, then changing the code doesn't help. But if nothing else, there has been certainly there's been a bunch of backlash, and the companies are going to have to address the privacy concerns. Remember, this has been going on for years, and it just only recently really came to the fore. So at least it's a good thing that it did. Just this morning, on November 18th, the EFF has announced an interesting initiative called Let's Encrypt. They have the domain name let'sencrypt.org, and next summer, so summer of 2015, they will be launching the EFF along with Mozilla and the University of Michigan, and Cisco's involved and a couple other large companies, but I think that primarily the EFF and Mozilla. I think
so great.
Yes. It is a free certificate authority whose mission is, as the title implies, Let's Encrypt, to get the rest of the internet encrypted by creating a facility which can issue free certificates. Now, more needs to be seen about how this is going to work. And in fact, I think very soon I'm going to cover the protocol. There's a protocol that's been developed called ACME, and I guess we would pronounce it ACME.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. So they're automating this so that the cost of an extended cert, for instance, you can't make that free, but this will be automated.
Correct. So ACME stands for Automated Certificate Management Environment.
Cool.
And what little is known so far, and only little because this happened this morning, and so I'm busy prepping for the podcast and pulling all of this together. GitHub has the protocol. There's a JSON over HTTPS protocol. JSON, of course, is JavaScript object notation, which is the approach that is sort of has won the war of XML and other approaches for sending data back and forth. The idea being that somehow this is a protocol between the server and the certificate authority. So presumably, and I'm just making this up at this point, the certificate authority queries the server in some fashion for something, and there's a conversation that involves this protocol, this ACME protocol, which allows the certificate authority to confirm the identity to some level of certainty, enough so that it's able to issue a certificate. And another part of this initiative that the EFF makes very clear is they talk about how it can take a couple hours for for an IT person to bring up security on a web server that doesn't have it, just because it's never been made easy. It's, you got to dig into, man pages and look through sort of strange, cryptic command line stuff and generate a certificate and send it to the CA and get the result and fix it in, set it in, and then you got to bind it to ports and open ports and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is that part of this is automating all of that too, so that for whatever server families they support with this, their goal is to make this one click. That is, you download something and you run it, and if you're running Apache, it knows about Apache config files and configuring and the Acme protocol. It downloads what it needs. It installs things. It edits the config files. There's a complete log of everything done, all configuration changes made, so that you're able to back out, or you're able, first of all, to audit them and then back out of any or change any that you don't like. It then contacts the CA, this whatever certificate authority this will be, that'll be established by summer of next year, and the CA through this interaction gets enough confidence with DNS lookups. And apparently they will be also using the Google's certificate transparency logging system to further heighten their confidence in their ability to issue certs, which is good. For example, I don't want anybody else to be able to get a grc.com cert. So we absolutely need protection against misissuance, and enough attention needs to be given to that. But that's presumably that's what the protocol will do. So it won't be able to issue, for example, extended validation certificates. And that's good. We want those still to mean something. We want those to mean that extended validation actually did occur. But the goal here is to, over time, make security ubiquitous. And the way to do that is make it free and make it easy. And this initiative, this Let's Encrypt initiative, the goal is to do both. So I'll know everything about it next time we talk about it. Good. Because it looks like a perfect topic.
And, kudos to EFF and Mozilla and Akamai and Cisco and IdenTrust, because, frankly, Google should be on that list. It's because Google prompted this whole thing with the change in how Chrome deals with certs, right? I mean, they kind of forced this HTTPS everywhere. Why aren't they doing this or involved in this? Google, put a little money into this, would you? Give us some 20% time here.
They certainly are doing the right thing with certificate transparency, along with DigiCert, who's the only other the only other CA right now that is running a certificate transparency facility, because DigiCert's been working with Google from the beginning on this, but Google is providing the stuff from their end. The other thing that is interesting, and this was mentioned along with this announcement, and that is the notion of short duration certificates. Remember that what we have now, because the issuing system is so burdensome, it's annoying to have to go through all of this every 2 years or 3 years. I mean, even that period of time, it's like, oh my God, got to go figure out that again. I mean, it's just long enough that you've completely forgotten how to do it, and then you have to figure it out again. So
that's a clever design.
So the alternative, if you think about it, is rather than having long life certificates, which you may need to revoke like early in their long life so that you kill them off for the balance of their otherwise valid period, imagine instead issuing short life certificates. If you were to issue certificates that only were valid for a few days, then you never need to revoke them. You just stop issuing them, and they expire. So another interesting approach here is the concept of, let's not worry about revoking certificates that have years of life left. Let's only issue certificates that never live more than a few days. But if we're going to do that, we have to make the process automated. We need to have exactly something like this, some way for the server, in the same way that right now servers can reach out to the certificate authority and ask for updated OCSP status. If you were to implement an OCSP must staple rule in order to say, here is a recent reassertion from the certificate authority that this certificate is still good. I mean, clearly this is a kludge. So an alternative is that the cert lasts only a few days, and the server daily goes and gets an updated certificate, and it's only allowed to do that, clearly, if the certificate is still valid. So it's a different model, and this looks like a really interesting step in that direction. So I'm with you 100%, Leo. This is a great-looking initiative.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I would argue there's still a position for extended validation certificates, or certificates that are asserting to a much stronger degree the identity. So all this is doing, this is saying this domain is associated, in DNS, this domain name is being served by this server. That's the assertion being made. So that's a distinction we need to make. That is, nowhere is EFF in this system, the let's encrypt technology, nowhere are they making an assertion about the entity that owns the domain. They're making an assertion about the domain name to IP and server mapping. That's what they're doing. So, and they're automating that and making it free. So that's valuable. But, I want green in my URL, and I want the browser to be able to make the assertion, this is Gibson Research Corporation, and someone, a certificate authority, went to the trouble of phoning us, talking to us, checking our D&B records, verifying addresses, and
flying a dirt box over you.
And that there's a real organization here. That's the role now for tomorrow's certificate authority in this new automated free certificate world. But not everyone needs that. Blogs don't need it. Small sites don't need it. But they'd like to have security. They'd like to have encryption. They'd like to have privacy of their communications. And note that none of this Verizon and AT&T super cookie stuff works if you've got HTTPS. That blocks it all.
Isn't that good news? Yeah, we want to do. In fact, DigiCert gave us some certs. We just haven't, because it's a lot of work apparently, installed them. But of course, we want to be able to offer HTTPS. But if somebody poses twit, there's not a lot of harm there. I mean, it's not like we do e-commerce, but it'd be nice to have a cert.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I'm absolutely sure that there will be technology in place when they refer to using certificate transparency and some other online facilities for verifying. Somebody else would have a big difficulty issuing themselves a twit.tv cert because you're already you exist. Your certificate is there. I'm sure this system will be making will have those checks and balances to prevent misissuance.
And by the way, I donate monthly, have a monthly subscription to EFF, and I encourage everybody to do so. They just are they're doing God's work. EFF.org. to support them. And I literally have an automatic monthly donation because it's just such a good, and I want to sustain it,
Yeah. So WhatsApp was in the news. They were, of course, acquired early this year, early in 2014, I think around February, for $19 billion.
22 when you calculated the inflated Facebook stock, it went up to 22. 22.
Nice. Yep, by Facebook in a cash and stock offer. They recently integrated Open Whisper Systems Text Secure into WhatsApp for Android.
That's so awesome.
Which is really cool. And it's enabled by default. So Text Secure we were just speaking about because an independent audit of it, which was possible because it's open source, concluded that with a little tweak, fixing something that was found, the Text Secure guys already were on it by the time this news was out. It passed with flying colors, with that one exception, and that's being fixed. So WhatsApp, of course, is 600 million users worldwide. WhatsApp for Android has this. We're not quite sure when iOS integration will be happening, but we presume it will be. The question I had, of course, is, okay, wait a minute. How does authentication happen? We know that there is a good, secure handshake that's easy to do. It's easy to the technology cryptographically for negotiating keys on the fly exists. But if you don't have authentication, then you're subjected to potential man-in-the-middle attacks. So I did a little digging because I hadn't looked at Text Secure closely. As for the security, that is the privacy of their messaging, they say Text Secure automatically detects, and this is Text Secure in the WhatsApp app for Android, automatically detects when a message is received from another Text Secure user, which will mean another WhatsApp user, and prompts you to initiate a secure session. If you choose to initiate the secure session, a key exchange will ensue, and a lock icon will be displayed in the title bar of the conversation view, as well as on the send button itself. So there's visuals showing you that this is now secure. A lock icon will also be displayed next to each encrypted message received in order to confirm that it was transmitted securely. That is, that your dialogue remains secure. But that still doesn't answer the question of authentication, which is crucial. Next, they said, under verifying keys, it is prudent to verify the identity key of a conversation's recipient in order to ensure that no man-in-the-middle attack has occurred. Because again, if you can know that the dialogue is encrypted, but unless you can verify the key that the key you are encrypting with or encrypting to is actually owned by the person you believe you're having the conversation with, then somebody else could have imposed themselves in between. Yes, you've got privacy, except you've included, a third party, which is certainly not your intention. So, in order to ensure that no man-in-the-middle attack has occurred, from the menu in a conversation, select Secure Session Options. And then under there is Verify Recipient Identity. This will present you with an option to manually verify the recipient key's fingerprint or to verify it by QR code scanning. If you're physically located in the same space as the recipient, you can select QR code scanning to quickly verify each other's fingerprints.
This is like Threema.
Yes, and this is the only way to do it. This is why Threema, what I liked about Threema was they got it. They put authentication right up out in front. That was the focus. But TextSecure has done it too. If you're remotely located, you can manually read the fingerprints to each other over the phone. So that's an out-of-band both of those are either optical or, some other means, acoustic in this case, out-of-band verification. But that you need to do. It says, once you verify that the recipient's identity is correct, this information is saved and used to automatically authenticate future secure sessions with that recipient. So anyway, so they've nailed it. And so this technology is in WhatsApp for Android, probably coming soon to iOS. And it's worth just once either, showing each other's WhatsApp's QR code, crossing that identity. And the fingerprint is just a hash of the key. And so you can just, read it over the phone or, fax it or send it through email. I mean, you'd like the channel to be as secure as you think is necessary. The idea being, though, that you just once need to make sure that you've actually got the other person's, the true other end's key. Once that's done, it's stored locally and it verifies all further communications. So it's very nice that this is going mainstream. And once that happens, my problem with iMessage is they've sacrificed all of this in the name of convenience, but in the process, we do not have a system that cannot be eavesdropped on. What TextSecure is giving us in WhatsApp is that, a conversation that we absolutely know cannot be eavesdropped on because we're given the responsibility of managing the keys. It's the fact that Apple does it for us that is the Achilles heel in iMessage, which is not to say that, they're decrypting conversations. They're not, as far as we know, but we know they can.
And if they if it were a demand from federal law enforcement, they'd have to, and they might not be even able to tell you they are.
We know that would be.
WhatsApp is not open source. So how do we verify that the implementation within WhatsApp is secure?
Yeah, I think at that point you just increase the thickness of your tinfoil.
So you can't be sure, but the problem with any of these solutions, Threema or TextSecure, is you have to get your friends to use it. And since WhatsApp is so widely used.
Yes, that is the benefit. Is 600 million worldwide now. And yes, and so it's way easier to overcome that with WhatsApp than it is with Threema.
And I think you're seeing the benefit of the Facebook acquisition here, because we know that Facebook and Apple and Microsoft and Google hate it that the NSA is demanding information from them. They all have transparency reports in which they're saying, we want to tell you, but we can't, what people are being asked to do. But this way, they secure it.
Right. These companies are suing the federal government for permission to talk.
Right. So I think you could probably safely assume that this is why Facebook's doing this, and they're making darn well sure that they don't have access to the keys, because if they did, then they'd have to hand over the data, and they don't want to.
They don't want to. Exactly. Now there's I'm not going to go off half-cocked the way the rest of the industry has, because there's some concern over BitTorrent Sync's security and privacy. It's just been raised. Everyone's running around suddenly saying, oh, my God, we shouldn't be trusting BitTorrent Sync. BitTorrent has themselves, in their own marketing side, claimed that Sync is performing 8 times faster than Google Drive, 11 times faster than OneDrive, and 16 times faster than Dropbox. So that's their push. Of course, it's super popular among people who are using it because it's using the BitTorrent protocol, which is strong and mature. It allows you basically to keep a whole bunch of different devices all synchronized And if one goes down, other ones are able to provide the data. The problem is that some hackers, I have to make sure I say this right, because the original term, of course, is cogito ergo sum. And
I think, therefore I am.
Right. And so these guys are hackito ergo sum.
I hack, therefore I am. And Rene Descartes is spinning in his grave. Yes.
So they're claiming that there are I know. They're claiming that there are, quote, probable vulnerabilities in the client only because they've made it crash. So we know that crashing is not the same as takeover, but it's not a good sign. And that the protocol can leak potentially sensitive hash and client IP data. Well, okay, it's not content, it's hash. And anyway, so this just happened. I'll follow this, and I'm sure my Twitter followers will make sure I see of any updates to this. I think it's way premature to worry. I know that BitTorrent is working now on a full rebuttal and response, which wasn't available at podcast time. And I'm tied into them. I'm on their PR list. All I want is a protocol documentation, and instead I just get PR nonsense from them, from their PR people. But it's like, okay, fine. At least I know what they're saying. And of course, BitTorrent adamantly disagrees with that characterization.
Well, just give us the code.
I know.
Here's something the chat room just told me about called Sync Thing that is open source. Same idea.
Yep.
And it has implementations for Windows, Linux, Mac, BSD, and Solaris, and it's open. So if it uses, I don't know if it uses BitTorrent protocols. Those are widely known.
Yes. Yeah, and there was we talked about on the podcast. There was a reverse engineering effort of the BT Sync protocol and I think that effort panned out. I mean, I think they figured out everything that was being done because it wasn't a huge change from the original BitTorrent protocol. They added a layer for doing, inter-device peer-to-peer syncing of files. So,
and Sync Thing works kind of similarly to BitTorrent Sync. You just give people your ID number and they can sync with you.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll have to try that. This looks kind of cool.
Miscellaneous gizmos, miscellaneous things. You want to take a break?
Yeah. We'll save the miscellany, and we still have questions, too.
And we do.
For just a little bit. But I want to talk about shaving. Everybody knows Steve's predilection for a little company called Harry's.
And I was using them, Leo, just minutes before while you were.
Look how clean shaven you are. And not a nick, not a cut. Harry, no. Just you look
and
good.
I got to say, I get tweets all the time from people who have done their own A, B, C, D comparisons, and they go, yep. I mean, best shave ever.
This is Movember. This is the month where people grow facial hair for Men's Health Awareness. And Harry's wants to celebrate. Yeah, you didn't know about that? Movember?
Here, I just shaved, Leo.
But you've got a mustache. You're a Movember man.
Excuse. Oh, okay.
You're a Movember man.
It's Movember. I don't have to shave.
So those of you who are not shaving, fear not. You can continue your Harry's subscription after November. And Harry's is making a donation to the Movember Fund to say, hey, no harm, no foul. It's okay. We're all guys here. Shaving is no fun, and you know that it's really kind of a well-known ploy. You give away the razor, and you make it up on the blades. And boy, it doesn't take much to go to the local drugstore. And you know those blades are pricey because they're locked up. They don't want anybody to shoplift the blades because they're like, what, $4 a blade? When I buy blades used to buy blades for my Fusion razor, I actually got sticker shock once. I was at the CVS and I bought like an 8-pack of blades. And it was like $40, and I said, no. And I put it back. I put it back. Thank goodness I found Harry's. Harry's actually makes better blades than those big companies. you know, what you're paying for with those big companies, big ads. Harry's makes great quality razors at about half the price because, well, for one thing, they own their own factory in Germany. When Jeff and the gang who founded Harry's, Jeff came from another startup you might have heard of, Warby Parker. Same idea. Let's take an industry that's ridiculous. The margins are ridiculous, and use the internet to kind of save people money and give them a great product. So he did. He said, well, we could do this with razors and blades, and he did a lot of research, and he found out there were two factories, both in Germany, that make the best blades, period. So he bought one. They own the factory and all the production of the factory. They engineer for sharpness and high performance. The blades last a long time, but you know what's nice is you get the subscription every other month. You get your Harry's blades, so you should change them every week. You always have a nice, clean, fresh blade. You can also get kits from Harry's. In fact, I suggest you visit harrys.com and get a kit. One of the kits we've got right here is the Truman. This is the one Steve likes because you like the flat handle. It gives you an idea of which way is which.
Yes, exactly. You get some orientation.
I have the Churchill or Winston, I guess it's called.
Good.
Yeah, the Winston is a little bit nicer, but it's round, and that's why I didn't like it. But both of them use these great Harry's blades. When you get the kit, $15 for the Truman kit, you will get not only the razor and a couple of blades, but you'll also get Harry's fabulous foaming shaving gel. Which
I'm now liking that.
have you tried it now?
That is. Oh, that's all I use.
Yeah.
Yes.
I still use I have cream left over, and I like it, but I will move to this.
Yeah.
I used it the other day on the show, and I thought it was kind of nice. I couldn't resist. Remember that?
Oh yeah, everyone does. That was great.
I had the kit, and I said, "Well, let me just try a little Harry's." I want you to
come
try.
out quickly. Yeah, you have to.
I had a face full.
It comes out very quickly.
Face full of foam.
Warning.
Anyway, I want you to visit harrys.com/products. Every kit gets a razor with a handle that looks and feels great. Actually, you get 2 blades in the box, and there's 1 on the handle. So it's a total of 3 blades. The foaming shave gel, the handle, $15. That is a deal. And each kit is, of course, guaranteed. Satisfaction guaranteed. And then you get on. I get the subscription every other month with new blades, new foam. I actually have several Harry's handles around the house, just because you never know when you might want to shave. There it is. It's there. So if you're not shaving for Movember, that's great. That's awesome. Harry's is donating the Movember Fund to show their support. But if you're, only 2 more weeks, maybe not even that long, if you're going to shave again, make your first shave the best shave of your life. Harry's, HARRYS.com. And when you buy, use the offer code SECURITY NOW, support Movember, and they'll give you $5 off your first purchase. But that's your first purchase only when you go to harrys.com and use the offer code SECURITY NOW, one word, at checkout. We love Harry's, and I love getting my Harry's gift. Quality craftsmanship, simple design, modern convenience, and a great shave at a fair price. That's HARRYS, harrys.com. And if Steve looks sharp, it's because his Harry's blade is even sharper. All right.
As expected, Sunday's twit discussion.
Oh, thank you for helping us with that, by the way.
Of net neutrality was great. I thought that was
your buddy Brett Glass, who's been on this show.
Yeah, and I thought, and your Sonic guy. I thought the dialogue between Brett and the Sonic guy, the Sonic.net
Dane
guy,
Jasper, the founder of SonicNet, yeah,
really, really useful. And I don't think anyone reached a conclusion. I don't think there is one. But for a sane, level-tempered, really thought-provoking dialogue. I wanted to make sure that our listeners remembered that the first hour of Twit last Sunday was that. It was, I thought, really interesting discussion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we were trying to shed more light than heat, and unfortunately, this is one of those things that if you don't, kind of come down on the right side, you hear from people. But we thought it was more important that people hear all of the pros and cons on each side so that they can make up their mind. And
yeah, the problem is it's complicated.
It isn't easy.
Yeah, it is a complicated, and where we are today is a mess.
Right.
And so that, like, how do we get from the mess we're in today to something that makes sense? And I mean, I completely agree with Brett, for example, saying that Title II is the wrong thing, but unfortunately, it's all we've got. And so the idea of reclassifying ISPs, as common carriers, and thereby subjecting them to all of Title II. ISPs look at Title II and go, "Wow, this is awful. This was written in the Stone Age compared to where we are." So, and as you guys said, one of the many suggestions, I think this was yours, was, well, can we get legislators to start over? Do something correct. And the problem is, wow, what a heavy lift that is.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. You should listen. I think you'll have an opinion. And then this is just the beginning of what we all need to go through, some homework to figure out what's the best solution.
Yeah, I would argue no conclusion is reachable, yet being informed, you can't ever have too much information.
Right.
And that first hour of Twit was really useful discussion and information.
Twit 484. Listen if you haven't.
And I forgot to mention, last week I was going to mention that Twit in the previous week, Dvorak said he thought Security Now was your best podcast.
Yeah, he loves you.
It's like, holy, what?
I was amazed that he listens.
Yeah, he seems impatient, but hello, John. Thanks. Okay, Interstellar.
Yes.
This is going to seem so geeky. I mean, I'm normally not this geeky. I think I don't sort of have a self-identity of being this geeky, but here was my problem. If they just, and this doesn't really give it away, so there's no spoilers here because it's no need to go into that. If they just called it a spatial anomaly, then I would be fine with that. But they call it a black hole. And then it did not behave in any way like a black hole. And that annoyed me. So
what specifics? Because, okay, so
for example, information can't come out past the event horizon of a black hole.
Well, that's why they had to go in. But really, Conan O'Brien said it best. He said, people are worried about scientific inaccuracies in black hole, but it doesn't bother them that Matthew McConaughey is an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
It's a movie. Now, I have to point out that the Nolans wrote this based on the writings of Kip Thorne, who is an astrophysicist and a black hole expert. Kip was there the whole time they made the movie and did the calculations. And even
Valium.
Well, even he says that the visualizations that the filmmakers make gave him some insight into this spinning black hole that he never would have had otherwise. It was very valuable for him. The bad astronomer, Phil Platt, said this is, this whole thing of a planet being on the edge of a black hole is impossible.
That too. That was annoying.
Well, then he took it back. He said, I'm sorry. This is a very special kind of anomaly. It's a spinning black hole.
It's a Hollywood anomaly.
Well, no, Kip Thorne, I think,
a spinning black hole.
There are such things apparently, and the physics of it and the calculations are very, very complex.
As matter condenses, you can get a lot of
rotation
spin.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Phil said, the calculations on spinning black holes are, if you think calculations with black holes are complicated, these are more so. And he said, I apologize, I was wrong. The planet on the edge of the black hole could exist, and the time anomaly they describe in the movie is possible.
Okay, because of relativity, which gives your catch-all. Okay, here's the problem, though, and that is gravitational gradient. You cannot, in your spacesuit, fall into a black hole.
I know.
You are shredded at the molecular level.
I know.
Gravitational gradient, as they say, will get you every time. And so, in Star Trek, I don't have a problem if they make up absolute nonsense and call it like possible. My problem is if they take something that we know a lot about the behavior of a black hole, and then just ignore it all. So, however, I thought it was a great movie. I mean, it was fun. It was great special effects. And after about half an hour, Jenny nudged me and she said, "This is different than I thought it was going to be." Because, of course, we spent a lot of time on the farm.
It's very emotional. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was a great movie. I think it will be considered a classic like 2001. By the way,
no.
Oh, yeah. You watch.
Really?
10 years from now, let's talk. And we know we'll be doing this show 10 years from now.
Yeah, I bet you nothing's going to stop it. We're in a black hole.
AMC has announced that they are going to offer unlimited tickets for people who would like to see this movie an unlimited number of times. If you've already gone to an AMC...
One was more than enough.
You really will feel like 7 years have gone by.
I could not sit through that again.
They said for $15, if you've already seen it once, you can buy an unlimited ticket to see as many times as you want.
See, that's a safe bet for them.
Did you notice it was really loud? This is what Scott Wilkinson was talking about on Saturday.
I was very aware of the power of the soundtrack, and that it really, if you didn't have that, you'd be like, okay, now what are they doing now?
Right.
Why
What is he doing?
Are we supposed to care about this? Is this dramatic or not? I really can't tell.
100 dB plus. In fact, I think he measured it. He brought a sound meter. Talk about
of course he did.
I think he said 117 dB at one point.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put anybody off of seeing it.
So did you like it?
It was really...
A little bit. You liked it a little bit. You wouldn't go see it again.
No, I couldn't. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes. It was a long movie.
Yeah.
And just kind of, I don't know. It was a little too pop for me. I guess that's what the way I would put it.
You wanted more science.
It's nice how everything wrapped up, and it's like, okay, well, we don't have any loose ends, and of course there is the fundamental problem, and I can't really say more because I refuse to do a spoiler, but there's the big causality problem of, you can't get that until you already have it. And then, so it's like, okay,
it's a movie, Steve.
All right.
You got to have some, did you like Back to the Future?
Loved it.
He saves his life by going back and making sure his parents meet.
Yeah, I guess that's a problem.
Remember, he has a photograph and he starts to disappear.
He had a hoverboard.
The hoverboard made it all right.
Actually, I don't think that was that one. That was one of the.
That was the second one. Yeah.
Back to the Future again. Okay,
there is a movie though that you do want to see.
Yes. Comes out Friday after Thanksgiving, November 28th, and it is. I saw an interview. What was it on? I saw an interview somewhere of several of the actors who star in the movie. It's called The Imitation Game. And in fact, the website is theimitationgamemovie.com. And I think you can get the preview there. It's very dramatic looking with lots of stuff going on the webpage. But anyway, it's the history or the story of Alan Turing and Bletchley Park and their decryption of the German Enigma machine ciphers and how vital it was and all of that. But apparently strong on being a tribute to Alan Turing. So
we have a viewer who saw it and said it's great and a heart-wrencher. So how do I get this site started here? Do I click? Do I rearrange? Seems like there's stuff going on.
I had scripting off, of course.
Oh, then it worked.
It kind of limped along and did stuff, but clearly a lot of attention was paid to it.
There's some real scripting going on here. Wow. All right. Well, I'm not going to be able to see the trailer unless I solve this crypto game, apparently.
I would imagine if you just put the Imitation Game into Google, IMDb probably has it with a lot less nonsense going on.
Well, now I've got to solve it. All right, go on. You know what I'll be doing for the next hour.
One of the main actors, not the ones that interviewed, one who is not sympathetic. I was looking at him. It's like, why do I know him so well? I mean, we already know him, but it's like, why do I know him so well? And he's like, oh, he's the evil father king on a Game of Thrones.
Oh.
And so they brought him out to play.
He's a good actor. Yeah.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So looks like it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And keeping in with our Q&A theme, I thought I would answer a listener's, because I encountered this reading the mailbag, answer a listener's question about full disk encryption with SpinRite and SSDs. That had never come up before. Greg wrote, he said, my routine before I do, and I should mention before, he's apparently a Linux guy. My routine before I do full disk encryption is to SpinRite, to turn it into a verb, the hard disk drive at level 5. So a full strength, deep SpinRite. The idea being to expose as much of the disk as possible before overwriting it with pseudo-random data. Following this, I install the encryption container using Linux's dm-crypt and Lux, L-U-K-S. Considering the wear that SSDs incur from level 5 SpinRite, do you think this is a good idea to do on SSDs prior to overwriting them? For security, the SSD has to be overwritten prior to putting the encryption on. So the wear incurred is necessary. But does my use of level 5 before overwriting make sense to you from a security perspective? Or do you recommend I just use level 2 for SSDs that I want to encrypt? My feeling is level 5 is what you want. Because once upon a time, when error correction was relatively weak on hard drives, and drives were a lot smaller, SpinRite wrote a whole bunch of patterns. Its strongest pattern testing did a whole bunch of stuff. Now, because error correction, as density is increased, out of necessity, the ability to do on-the-fly error correction has been strengthened dramatically. And of course, chip density is higher, algorithm that supports much stronger algorithms for correction. The chips are much faster, so they're able to do more on the fly and so forth. So as all of that scaled up and drive size scaled up, SpinRite's the surface analysis and testing that SpinRite had to do was scaled down in proportion. So now what SpinRite does is only 2 writes. It reads what's there, inverts it and writes that, reads that, inverts it again, and writes it back. So that's just 2 writes.
And we know that doesn't make it wrong.
Actually, because it's inverting, it puts them right back where they came from.
There you go.
Exactly. And then you're going to run encryption, which is going to go across the entire thing again. So if you did nothing, if you did no writing, then you'd write everything once. If you use level 5 on SpinRite, you're writing everything 3 times. And compared to the writing that you're going to be doing for the rest of the drive's life, that's nothing. So and it does make sense, I think, to run SpinRite over an SSD to help the SSD immediately find any areas that it might want to swap out at that point. Now, one thing that you didn't mention and that everyone should think about is after you put encryption on the drive, you really then want to reset trim, because both running SpinRite on an SSD where SpinRite is doing any writing or doing whole drive encryption, will saturate the drive's trim bits. Remember that trim is an extra facility in SSDs to dramatically speed it up, where it operates at the sort of at the physical level of the SSD to inform, to sort of remember whether anything useful has ever been written there. And if you run SpinRite on the drive, on an empty drive, you've written nothing useful. So you absolutely want to run a trim clearing utility after that. And without giving away too much, that'll be an option in the future at my end. But if you then encrypt the SSD, you're writing all the sectors again. So what you need is you need to be able to run some sort of trim clearing utility on the post-encrypted SSD to get it to relax, essentially to tell it that even though a lot of writing has been going on, we don't care about any of that, because then you're going to put the file system on the drive, and that's going to be doing the first actual writing that we care about. So I would argue, I would look into post-encryption trim clearing on SSDs. I'll be able to do post-SpinRite trim clearing, but that wouldn't help you in this case because you're then going to write the entire drive one more time.
All right. And we'll leave it as an exercise to the listener to figure out how to do that.
There are lots of utilities for doing that.
Why is this at the end of your show notes?
That's at the end of the show notes. If you zoom in,
it's a picture of a CD.
It's actually a very special DVD called an M disc.
What is an M disc?
And it's made by Hitachi, and something with an interesting name, which I was able to pronounce.
Millenniata.
Millenniata. I love that. This refers to one of, I'm glad you asked the question, by the way, Leo. This refers to one of our 5 questions. This is a 1,000-year archival storage.
Millenniata.
Literally written. Are you sitting down on your ball? I think you are.
I am.
Literally written in stone.
What?
It doesn't use dyes. It uses inorganic material, basically stone. It melts the stone.
Wow.
And so it inscribes 4.7 gig in stone.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Wow, we'll talk about that because our question and answer section has arrived.
Yes.
And we will start with question numero uno. Let me just take the Millenniata out of the way. It's kind of a big, I blew it up. It's real big now, and I can't see the questions anymore. Advait in India wants to know about going to your servers at level 3. Steve, on the past episode, you said you had to physically go to your servers to update them for the S-channel bug. We now know you're going to have to do that again, apparently. So why do you need to go to them? Can't you just do it remotely? Well, that's a good question. I thought you could pretty much do all Windows Server maintenance remotely, including power cycling if you have the right equipment. Don't most colos allow for remote power cycling? I know ours does. Just curious. Thanks. Love the show. Happy SpinRite owner, etc. Advait.
So I thought this was an interesting question. I had several other people ask, like, wait a minute, why are you going there? And the only reason is I have been so well trained by Murphy. I am a disciple of Murphy. Yeah. And this was, as I mentioned, since I'm not rebooting them all the time, I've, like in this case, it's been 6 months since I've had to touch them. And that meant that I'd be doing a lot of patch catch-up. And, we've all had the experience of, doing a big update and rebooting our system, and the screen stays black. And for GRC, I didn't want to be here at home, clicking things, pressing buttons, waiting for the server to come back up and have it not. So I wanted to be there where I, was physically present and could deal with anything that might happen. And as it was, I made fresh images and did some other, just sort of, cleanup stuff. And, I just never visit. So it was nice to sort of check in, and it feels good to sort of see that everything's the way I left it. And I think, frankly, this little update, I probably won't bother making a trip. Since I just did a week ago, I will make sure that I've got a current set of images and backups, but this one I will do remotely. So, and I have power control equipment, and I can do power cycling and all that stuff remotely. But this seemed like, well, it's been 6 months. It's worth a trip.
Yeah.
And as it happened, everything went just swimmingly.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Charles Victorian, great name, in Houston, Texas, has some squirrel implementation help questions. Steve, longtime listener, blah, blah, blah. All episodes, blah, blah, blah. Security Now University graduate, etc. You and Leo rock, blah, blah, blah. He actually wrote all of that, by the way, folks. I'm not making it up. In pondering a squirrel, I was wondering / hoping for 3 important things. Would you please help with the creation of tools or libraries or simple instructions, etc., so that web developers not on the rocket surgery level can easily implement your strategy for login? Dumbing it down may be important for this to catch on like wildfire. 2, would you please create a sample login page on your website which would allow people using your squirrel reference implementation or any other, really, to have a known working location to experiment with logging in via Squirrel. 3, would you please make an iOS Squirrel client yourself so that we know it's as TNO as possible? I, and perhaps many others, apply the TNOBS principle, trust no one but Steve. We'd pay for that app. Not trying to be mean to other iOS devs, but they haven't earned your white hat reputation yet. I'm just saying. Thanks for all your hard work to both you and Leo.
Okay, so a couple things. Other developers, the first point was, what about dumbing it down or making it easy to implement? There will be drop-in packages for all the major web server-side stuff. Drupal and PHP libraries and all of that. That's all under, in the works and underway, and there are some that are even up and running at this point. So it won't be necessary for anyone to write this stuff from scratch, though once this is all absolutely finalized, I absolutely will have some simple flow charts of what API call you issue when. Other people who are involved in the GRC news groups have asked for the same thing. As for a sample login page, yes, absolutely. There's actually, it's already there, although it doesn't quite do much. I'm using it myself for as I'm finishing the final phases of this. grc.com/squirrel, SQRL/demo.htm will present you with a valid Squirrel QR code right now. And once you have the client, you can either click on it if it's, well, in fact, you would in your browser, click on it. And Leo, if you refresh that, every time you refresh it, you'll see that you get a different, actually, yours is blanking the whole page, so it's less easy to see. On a Firefox, it just changes the QR code. It just goes blink.
It's because everybody has gone to your page.
That's right. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that will allow you to log in and create a fake Squirrel account, and also show you when you last logged in, how many you've logged in, when you've changed your identity, a whole bunch of other metrics and so forth. And then there will be another place, it'll be squirrel/dump.htm, that doesn't yet exist, where all of the crypto stuff will be made visible, so that developers will be able to verify that their crypto exchange is the same thing that GRC is seeing. So that stuff is easy to do. I just haven't gotten around to it. But essentially a pseudo login facility where you create squirrel accounts. That's actually the database on the back end is already there. I just haven't brought it out to the web surface yet. And as for iOS, no. I'm going to be going immediately back to SpinRite 6.1 and returning to the development of that. I don't know of an iOS developer except that Ralph had mentioned. Ralph is the person who has done the Android client implementation that is up and running and works for Android that people can download. If you have an Android device, you can get Squirrel for it right now. Although Ralph has not finalized it until I finalize mine, and there have been some protocol tweaks. And he did reference months ago doing one for iOS. I'll be happy to work closely with any iOS developers to have it, get my seal of approval. But that's the most I can do. I can't take any more time away from SpinRite. Maybe after 6.1 is behind me, we'll sort of see where things go. I also don't want to spend any time if it never gets off the ground, because that would be sad. But on the other hand, it will help to have an iOS implementation for it to get off the ground. So maybe I could say that the first iOS Squirrel implementations won't be the last. And we'll just have to play it by ear.
Question 3 comes from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. James is the one who told us about the Stone DVDs, the Millenniata, the M-Disc. Now, I got to point out, good for 1,000 years, but yeah, 1,000 years from now, who are you going to sue if it's not? Oh, man, It's not good for 1,000 years.
So it's a couple years old. It's called the M-Disc, just letter M and then DIS. Now, I wrote K, but I don't know if it's K or C. So sometimes discs are with a C. And it was Mitsubishi that had acquired the rights and was going to produce the medium and the drives. I don't think this thing uses standard DVD writers. So I think you need, because apparently it is stone. So it's going to use like a stronger laser.
I would hope it would use standard readers, however.
I don't know either way.
That would be an issue, because 1,000 years from now, if it's a non-standard reader, chances of getting one are slim.
Very good point. 1,000 years is a long time, Leo.
Even 10 years from now, the chance of getting a reader might be slim.
So we had been talking about archiving, and several people, one whom is a member of the archives, Archivist Association, talked about the Stone DVD and the M-Disc. So this is the real deal. If you're somebody who wants to, has an interest in storing in allotments of 4.7 gig, that is a single-sided DVD. Wait, that's Blu-ray density, because a DVD. Isn't a DVD?
No, that's DVD. Blu-ray's more than.
Yeah.
It says, apparently, it does say readable on current DVD and Blu-ray drives. So you can read it. You just can't write it without a special writer.
That absolutely makes sense.
You need a chisel and a hammer.
So they've kept the format identical to standard DVD. Yeah, a Blu-ray, of course, is in the 40 and 50 gig range.
And a single-sided is 4.7.
Right.
So
right.
DVD, yeah. They apparently do make them in Blu-ray sizes. Probably want that.
No kidding. Wow.
Probably would want that. Question number 4. Dave in Southampton, United Kingdom, wonders about data recovery on destroyed hard disks. Steve, in a team meeting, a sad and unfortunate story of a soldier in Afghanistan being killed by an IED was told. The story was used to highlight a security problem with hard disks, because although the laptop he was carrying and the hard disk it contained were both destroyed, the data on the laptop was important and was retrieved by taking the disk apart and scanning it somehow to get some of the data back. The story was told to us to highlight the issue even after destroying hard disks simply by drilling a hole through them or taking them apart and cutting them to pieces with tin snips. This may not completely destroy the data that's on them. Now, I accept it's possible to get the data back from a disk that's been destroyed in this manner, although I will fall off my chair if you can tell me you will do it with SpinRite. How hard is it to actually do, assuming the disk was not encrypted? What type of equipment would be needed to achieve such a task? How long could it possibly take? My current contention, until you tell me otherwise, is that it is extremely difficult to do, requires extremely expensive equipment and people. Let's assume that he is an attacker. He may not get the data that's of any use to him. If I'm correct on this, then I would assume that an attacker who would have the resources to do this would also have the resources to place an insider in an organization, because that'd be a lot easier. What do you think? Many thanks. Regards, Dave. P.S. If this answer is heard on Security Now, please do not give my surname, in case someone from my team also listens. I get accused of rocking the proverbial boat again. But you can give my location.
So, okay. The only way to get data back at today's recording densities is to somehow put a disk that can still spin and aerodynamically support a flying head over its surface.
In other words, isn't bent.
Right. And it hasn't had tin snips, or hasn't had a pattern of holes drilled through it, all of which would destroy the ability of a head to fly. Older generation drives may have had simpler recovery being feasible. You could actually, there used to be a solution you could actually rub on an old style oxide disc and then look at it through like a microscope and read the bits. You could actually see the bits, because this fluid was affected by the magnetic domains stored on the oxide. But today's densities make that absolutely impossible. So if the story is not apocryphal, I mean, if it's actually true that following an IED explosion, and it wasn't clear whether the bad side got the disk, recovered the laptop and disk. It sounds like maybe our guys got it and were somehow able to recover it.
The whole thing's made up. Come on. It's not a true story.
Anyway, the answer would be you could, I mean, if you really needed to recover it, you would take the drive apart and mount those platters in the same make and model of another drive, and then maybe have a chance.
And we've talked about this before. It'd be possible. I mean, this is governmental level decryption.
It is really you'd have it would be. Oh no, it's absolutely
it's not
NSA.
The mob.
No. It's NSA labs absolutely need to recover the data level.
Right.
But again, our technology, as we talk about this all the time, hard drive storage is so fragile that it barely works on a good day. So, subjecting a drive to any kind of physical trauma, forget about it. I mean, it's especially tin snips and drilling holes with drills. It really does.
It's hypothetical. It's hypothetically possible that you could read somehow the magnetic field on the disk if you had extraordinarily sensitive equipment, and then somehow hypothetically assemble it. When we've heard of people do kind of outrageous things like reassemble shredder pages.
Well, but see, there you have the benefit of them being physical things.
Right, you can look at it.
Because anyone who actually knows what happens between the user submitting 110011 and what's written will really appreciate. There's 4 different stages of translation. And one of them is called whitening, where its goal is to average the number of transitions per linear extent in order to keep the right amplifier from being too much biased in one direction or the other. So, like, my point is that even the magnetic image on the drive is only distantly related to the data that was originally written, and only all of the electronics and data recovery in the read path of the drive that wrote it even knows how to translate the magnetic information back to the usable user data. So even if you had if you could even get the actual magnetic patterns, that's not the data that was written on the drive.
Right.
You have to go back through the read process. And how do you do that?
Right. Yeah. Not to worry.
Not to worry.
Final question from Charles is it the final question? Actually, I didn't check.
Yeah.
Charles in the UK. We're talking about brute force encryption. There's one thing with brute force attacks against encryption that always left me perplexed. How do you know you succeeded? How do you know the result of decrypting with a key is a success if you don't know what to expect?
You know, this is a great question, and it comes up all the time. And normally, we run out of space. I thought, okay, today, question number 5, since we got so much to talk about at the top of the show, and as it turns out, our timing was about right. Okay, let's look at 2 examples. The only way to answer the question is to actually drop it into the real world. 2 examples. The first is, and 2 relevant examples. The first is communications. With an SSL TLS connection, and the issue is brute force determination of the key. How do we know? Well, as we mentioned recently, unfortunately, SSL got the order of authentication and encryption wrong. They got it backwards. The original designers, the well-meaning guys at Netscape, they said, we're going to take the user's data. We're then going to authenticate the data, that is, run an HMAC over it or whatever, and have the authentication added to the end. Then we're going to encrypt it. That's unfortunately wrong. As we discussed then, the well understood now in contemporary crypto knowledge is you always encrypt, then you authenticate, because the process of decryption requires a reversal of steps. So that means if you encrypt, then authenticate, which is correct, but unfortunately not what SSL does, then that means the first thing you do when you need to decrypt is to authenticate, then decrypt. But with SSL, it's backwards, which means that the last thing done is encryption, which means the first thing we do is decryption. And that means that we can always test to see whether our decryption was correct, because we then verify authentication. And so SSL, by doing it in that order, the only good side, I mean, there's other bad aspects to it, but in this case, we can do a trial decryption and then a trial authentication. And if the key is wrong, we will have decrypted the wrong data, which will not authenticate. And so in the case of communications flow, we're able to verify by checking the authentication. The second real-world example, completely different, is stolen passwords, which we're talking about with websites all the time. Somebody gets a database of password information belonging to some website. Now, what do they have? They have the hashes of the user's passwords. So what they're looking at, what they have, is the result of the input password being hashed through whatever algorithm the site uses, which they presumably know, because that's typically part of what they're able to figure out in order to crack this. So the goal is they've stolen the password database. They want to determine the input. They want to determine the input passphrase that when run through the hashing algorithm, whatever it is, how many iterations of algorithm it might be, how much strengthening it has, and so forth, they want to determine the input passphrase that results in the hash that they have in the database. So they're not actually decrypting that hash in the database. Rather, they're successively, you could think of it as encrypting or enhashing. They're successively hashing guesses to see if they get the same result. The reason is, if they get the same result, then they have figured out almost certainly the user's password, or at least a password that results in the same hash, which then allows them to go to that website and log in as that user. And if the user has been unwise and reused that same password elsewhere, and they have any other information about the user that they also stole, like their email address, name, and so forth, maybe they can use that same information to log into other websites to impersonate the user. So those are two examples. In one case, the authentication, which is part of the integrity guarantee of communications, it can be used to verify the decryption, is that the guess is correct. And in the instance of password database being stolen, you're not really decrypting what the database had, but rather you're doing the same thing the server did when the user enters their password to get a result. You know the result, so now you just make a lot of guesses until you get the same result. And that's how it works in the real world.
Excellent. Or you just, as somebody in the chat room said, you shout, "I have the message," versus "I have the message," Z4391 exclamation mark QTTY, none of them. Fine. Right? Usually it's pretty obvious. Hey, Mr. G, that concludes this edition of the fabulous Security Now podcast. Each and every week we meet and talk about the latest issues in security. Next week, do you know yet, or is it going to be a surprise?
Don't know. I'm really curious about this ACME protocol, which the EFF is using. And to what degree, how much they're doing. I want to see how much is there. So if there's enough there, we might talk about that. Otherwise, I've got a long list of stuff to get to. So, well, I'll pick something.
You can find Steve on the internet at grc.com. That's his home on the web. He also has a lot of stuff there you might want, including SpinRite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility, and all the freebies like crazy he gives away. You'll also find 16 kilobit audio of this show and transcripts written by Elaine Ferris, so they're very easy to read and a good thing to read along while you're listening. Steve's on the Twitter at SGGRC. Questions to Steve can be forwarded to him from grc.com/feedback. We have full quality versions of the show, audio and video, available at our site, twit.tv/SN, on youtube.com/securitynow, and wherever finer podcasts are aggregated for later distribution through the internet network of networks. Mr. G?
As Brett reminded us, it's actually not owned by anyone. It's an internet of networks.
It's an internet of networks. A net of networks.
Leo, always a pleasure. I will be back with you next week.
Thank you, sir.
See you.
Security.